Thanks for tuning into the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another hip hop topic, a random topic I was thinking about today, just going through a bunch of different movies. And I started to think to myself, what was the best hip hop movie of all time? Now, that's a very, very difficult question to answer or pinpoint just because of the different subgenres. And I've identified different subgenres for hip hop movies. So, doing research on hip hop movies, I've seen a lot of movies that had nothing to do with hip hop, but when you look deeper into the meaning of hip hop movies, you have to think about all of the elements or things relating to hip hop can be considered a hip hop movie. So, first classification I thought about of a hip hop movie is autobiographical. Now, these are the movies that tell non-fictional stories to a degree about hip hop artists. Now, these are the movies that are biographical as well from other people's accounts of stories, but mostly um, someone close to the artist or the artist themselves telling the story and it's portrayed throughout a movie. So when you think about the Straight Outta Compton movie that depicted the story of NWA, even Snoop Dogg as well, peripherally, you think about 8 Mile, the storytelling about Eminem's life and coming up as a battle rapper and finally making it. You think about the Notorious movie about Notorious B.I.G., who's his mother, Valletta Wallace, died today. Rest in peace. That movie told the story about Biggie and what he had to go through from being on the streets to being an artist and being discovered and making his way up the ranks up into his untimely passing. Or you think about a movie like Get Rich or Die Trying, which, basically it's talking about 50 Cent's life to some degree, dramatized a little bit, but for the most part, telling about how he came up Southside Jamaica, Queens, and becoming this famous rapper. And then the Crush Groove, which talked about a upstart label, which was supposed to be, I guess, Def Jam, and it featured a lot of different artists, and it was somewhat autobiographical. Now, the next section of the hip hop movie is I classified as musical. So when you think about the House Party series, you think about Carmen, a hip opera, which is the Mekhi Phifer and Beyonce movie. Or when you think about CB4, which is considered a musical, but it was kind of loosely based on the NWA story, but it had fictional characters. Uh, so that was the musical section. And there's other musicals as well. They classified like movies like, well, musicals like Rent, which I wasn't a big fan of Rent. Uh, but nevertheless, those are the type of musical sections. And then you have the elemental movies, hip hop movies, which are those movies that display the elements of hip hop. So when you think about the elements of hip hop, you got your DJing, you have the MCing, you have the graffiti, the break dance, the fashion, the knowledge, all of the things that are components of hip hop that make up hip hop. So this, you think about the movie Juice with Tupac. Now people say, well, how is that a hip hop movie? Well, in the movie, it was a hip hop soundtrack, and um, Omar Epps' character was a DJ trying to make it in the world in high school as a DJ. So it talked about the element of DJing in that movie, and it had a hip hop soundtrack. Brown Sugar is another one. It had Mos Def in the movie, but the movie was pretty much about MCing and about the background of the backside of the business, being A&R, looking for new talent and looking for what is he considered true hip hop, and that was Mos Def's role, and it epitomized that in its entirety. When you think about the Brown Sugar movie, which is one of my favorite hip hop movies of all time, Wild Style, which talked about all 5 elements of hip hop or all the elements of hip hop in one movie. It was a catalyst for hip hop movies, and it kind of set the ground and one of the classics that we have. And then Hustle and Flow, which talked about producing and talked about emceeing as well. It didn't really have any. I mean, it had 3 6 Mafia doing the songs, and they ended up winning Grammys and Oscars for it. But uh, that movie was a big time in hip hop, and for hip hop especially, to win an Oscar for a soundtrack. It was big. It was a big news back then, and it still is today. And then lastly, the type of hip hop movies, you have a hip hop general. Now, these are movies that involve hip hop figures, but are not based on hip hop elements or just, hip hop themes, so to speak, but they have a hip hop soundtrack or the culture is embraced into it. So when you think about a Paid in Full, there's a lot of Eric B. and Rakim, and even the name of the movie is based off Eric B. and Rakim's song Paid in Full. And then you think about the Friday movie, it was, written and starring Ice Cube, the How High movie, which had Method Man and Redman, and then Above the Rim, of course, it had Tupac in it, State Property, which was the Rockefeller guys, and then Choices with the 3 6 Mafia artists, and then Baller Block, in which had Cash Money, and Cash Money artists, and then Belly, of course, had DMX and Nas in it. From an overall standpoint, when you think about all those four, when you think about those four different subgenres for hip hop movies, my favorite movie out of all of them is the House Party series. And I just didn't want to put one House Party movie because I really don't have a favorite. All of them are pretty monumental to me and have a good storyline. But they're my favorite hip hop movie series because of the originality and the freshness, and also the storylines in the movie. These movies are very original, had a lot of flavor, is what they say in hip hop sense. The fashion, the rapping, just the hairstyles, everything about it embodies what is hip hop, and it was the epitome of hip hop and what hip hop means to be. And it had a lot of MCing and DJing, fashion, and then they have some breakdancing in the movie as well. But when you think about Kid and Play, TLC, Full Force, Immature, Raphael Sadiq, they were all featured in all those movies in the first three. I didn't count everything after three, just all the ones with Kid and Play in them. And then you had Martin Lawrence character Bilal being a DJ, and then of course Kid and Play were the rappers. So they had that relationship. So I think Bilal was kind of a producer as well, but it had those elements in hip hop in it. Now, from an autobiographical standpoint, I want to say Straight Outta Compton is the best autobiographical, having that great production and directors in it, and Ice Cube's son O'Shea Jackson Jr., who made a movie career off of playing his dad's character in Straight Outta Compton, and just how great he was, especially for his first movie. He did a very good job, and all the actors did a great job in that movie as well. One of the best stories in hip hop history, and it makes more sense once you see the movie and you get a true aspect of everything, like how Eazy-E was on the streets and he didn't even know how to rap, and Ice Cube and Dr. Dre kind of taught him how to rap, and how Ice Cube used to write for everybody, and he was just dissatisfied about everything, and it broke everything down, especially for people like me who were kids around that time and didn't know the whole story. Well, most people probably didn't know the whole story because, social media and all these different outlets went out back then to get their stories out. I already talked about how Brown Sugar is my favorite element of hip hop movie, just from the true love of hip hop and how they talked about what hip hop is and what it means to them, and the first time they fell in love with hip hop, all these different things, which I still remember the first time I fell in love with hip hop is when I was hearing Nas's Illmatic, which is still in my CD player to this day. I talk about one of the best albums ever put out, but Brown Sugar talked about what true hip hop is. And if you want to know what true hip hop is, watch a movie like Brown Sugar. It's all about it. And then lastly, my favorite hip hop general movie is just Friday because of the clever storyline and the humor. It's a cult classic, and it wasn't projected to be that. It ended up being that off of just the sheer genuineness of the movie. They filmed the movie pretty much on one street in California, and it was just genuinely funny. They weren't trying to do too much. It was just general. It felt realistic, and it felt like something we all go through normally on a Friday, living in the inner city. And it's also one of the biggest underdog movies of all time. Like I said, they had a small budget. There were not a lot of residuals from that movie to this day. I know Michael Blackson talks about, the lack of money he gets from doing the second movie. But these movies weren't projected to do well But I hope, that Last Friday movie still comes out. But unfortunately, they lost a lot of characters that won't be able to be in the new one. And when they finally release it. But, that's my wrap up on the top hip hop movies. Tell me what you think tell me what is your favorite hip hop movie. And then until next time, I'll see you next time.